Well, I woke up this morning from a reoccurring dream.
Hello, people. I'm Jaby KOAY, joined by ACHARA KIRK.
What's up?
We got a serious video in front of us, I presume. SHASHI THAROOR argues why British rule destroyed India, North Korea, and liberalism. So, yeah, SHASHI THAROOR hits hard with the realness.
Yep.
If you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button, please. Bell icon, all notifications, and pretty please, vote this up to let YouTube know you're enjoying what you're watching. I'm just psyching myself up for this. This is gonna be serious stuff.
like,
we've had this
Put
on
on your thinking hat.
Yeah, we've had this on the tabs, on the Chrome tabs for a while as something that we've been meaning to get to, and it's like, okay, do we have the
Fortitude.
the stamina for this?
Yes.
The emotional and mental stamina for this. Not that it's boring or anything like that. It's just that we know that it's going to be serious is the easiest way to put it.
Intense.
Intense.
Yeah.
Sure. All right, here we go.
Let's move on to our next question. It's from Kevin Peterson. Sorry.
My question is to SHASHI THAROOR. Happy Onam first.
Oh, thank you. You too.
You mentioned about Britain. Mentioned that Britain left India in a worse off condition than had it been without Britain. You also mentioned about reparation from Britain.
Yes.
What about the skills in engineering and manufacturing India acquired, the administrative and democratic processes it inherited, the infrastructure left behind, and most of all, the rapid education of the Indian people, of which you are an excellent example?
That is something
That's actually a
that's
stellar question.
No, that's an argument that comes up. I've heard this come up when I've kind of had the conversation with some of my British friends, and they're all like, okay,
Yeah.
yes, granted, there were a lot of problems with the Brits coming into India, but what about all of those reasons
Right.
that gentleman just listed?
Well, the one I see from Indians is, well, they united us because India was like a bunch of different
Kingdoms?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say tribes, but yeah, kingdoms is more accurate. I almost wonder if that guy who asked that question was asking it in order to elicit the response we're sort of expecting.
Yeah.
You know, like he did it on purpose.
Yeah, I really do want to hear what he has to say. Look at he's like, oh, I've got a good answer.
No one can price these intangible values that were gained during the British rule in India and propelled the country to its present position as one of the leading
guy on the
countries
left's
in
like,
the world. Finally, one more question. I'm doing a Jeffrey Robertson here. In your opinion, where would India be today if the British did not step into India?
Oh, there's a lot there. It'll take the rest of the program to answer. I'll try and touch on it. But this is almost like the American saying to the widow of the American president, apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? And, you know, really, the British came to one of the richest countries in the world, accounting for 27% of global GDP in 1700, 23% in 1800, and over 200 years of exploitation, depredation, loot and destruction, reduced it to a poster child for third world poverty, just over 3% of global GDP, 90% of the population living below the poverty line when the British left in 1947, a literacy rate, you speak of education, a literacy rate below 17%, and a life expectancy of 27. The growth rate of British India from 1900 to 1947 was 0.001%. That's what they were doing while draining the country of taxes and resources. Education, my gosh, the British, the last thing they wanted to do was invest in educating Indians. Will Durant, the American historian traveling in India as late as 1930, pointed out that the entire expenditure of the British on education in India, from the nursery level to the highest universities, was less than half the high school budget of the state of New York. All the Indian institutes of technology, the engineering achievements you're talking about, were established after independence by the government of India. There is simply no comparison between the accomplishments of India rising from the ashes the British left us in and what was done in 200 years. I've given many figures.
Just take one example, the textile industry.
Damn. Oh, damn. Just the way he came at him with all of that data.
And you know what it reminds me of? Like your favorite podcast. Every time Dick Masterson used to go, have I got a stats for you? I feel like, Shashi Tharoor comes in and he's all like, oh, have I got some stats for you? Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap.
I mean, he laid it out thorough.
Yeah.
I was still processing the last thing he said, the last thing he was answering, and he was already moving on to the next thing. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, I haven't fully emotionally digested what you just said. And he's already hitting the dude. And you can see the guy's face. Like, his smile quickly turns into this, like, oh my God, am I stupid? Like,
well, yeah, because I feel like perhaps a lot of what he was saying while he was saying it, I was like, it almost feels like these are the types of arguments that people have heard to kind of rationalize and make sense of it all, or try and look at the positive side to it. It looked like he really, really believed that hardcore.
I do think that there are positives that come from it. It's atrocious what happened. It's horrendous.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are positives that have come from it. I mean, the fact that, I don't know, man, it's confusing. It's emotionally confusing. But the fact that I'm able to have an audience with you guys, I don't know if the Brits never came in and if history didn't go the way that it did, I don't know that I would be able to have an audience with you guys. It's fundamentally made a positive impact on my life, and hopefully I've made a positive impact on a lot of your lives. And we wouldn't have that relationship. That's just one little thing, right? In our version of how things laid out, because there's I believe in the multiverse. And so, who knows what it looks like in another dimension or another version of our world where it didn't play out that way.
Yeah. It's like Wakanda or something.
We have no idea. We don't know what it would have been. And the fact of the matter is we live in this dimension where it played out this way. And it's important to recognize our history the way Shashi Tharoor often reminds us. But I do think that in defense of that guy who had no idea what was coming his way.
He should have known better, to be fair.
In defense of him, it's like I recognize the earnestness of trying to see the positive. I think there's something, cool about that, trying to see the positive. But you recognize history, dude.
And what was done in 200 years. I've given many figures.
Just take one example, the textile industry, because India was a huge exporter of
For 2,000 years, it was the world's leading exporter.
What happened?
In fact, in the Roman Empire, there are debates recorded by Pliny the Elder of Roman senators complaining about the amount of the Roman Empire's gold that was being sent off to India because of the tastes of Roman women for Indian muslins, linens, and cottons.
Was it just modernism, the Industrial Revolution that destroyed it, or was it something else?
No, that's the excuse that apologists like to make, that, it's not our fault, you just missed the bus for the Industrial Revolution. Well, we missed the bus because you threw us under its wheels, is what I tell the Brits. I mean, the fact is, in the name of free trade, the British came in and destroyed the free trade that had made India a leading exporter of textiles. The British soldiers smashed the looms so people couldn't practice their craft. They imposed punitive duties and taxes on the export of Indian textiles while lifting duties on the import of British cloth. And they achieved a captive market at the point of a gun. This is not exactly free trade, as you can imagine. Cities like Murshidabad and Dhaka in the subcontinent were depopulated. In one notorious incident, weavers had their thumbs cut off, so when the looms were repaired, they couldn't weave again. Textiles were systematically destroyed as an industry by the British. And that's only one example of many.
Well, I'm going to quickly go back to our question now, Kevin. Do you accept that perhaps the British weren't quite as benign as you've just suggested?
Please read the book, Kevin. There's a lot more there to substantiate.
I've got the book.
I'll bring Laurie in here. He gave a speech along these lines to the Oxford Union. Got wild applause from the students and others sitting around the Oxford Union Hall. And I'm just wondering, have young Brits come to terms with their colonial past?
No, we haven't at all. Young Brits of every class have no idea about our colonial past, and that is being deliberately done. We are deliberately denied or kept away from education about the graphic facts of what the British did around the world, including in this country.
This is true in Japan as well, just so y'all know. And they're trying to do it in Texas. They're trying to erase, this is what I've heard, I haven't seen it with my own eyes,
right?
But it seems like they're trying to erase slavery or at least downplay it.
Yeah, it's like, it wasn't a big deal.
One of the paramount reasons for the Civil War, when it was.
Yeah.
Apparently not a lot of history in Japan about Pearl Harbor, about their leading involvement in World War II, joining Axis power and all that. And so Japan has done a lot of erasing of its own history for saving face. you know, for, I guess, the generations to come. I get it. I get where it comes from. It's a natural instinct to try to hide the disgraces of your past and just elevate the good, honorable stuff that you've done as a person. I think all of us understand that. Unfortunately, collectively as a nation, when you do that, if you don't do what Germany did, I feel like you run the risk, although Japan has been pretty good, you run the risk of history repeating itself in a very fundamentally bad way. It seems like in this country, it's already repeating itself in a number of areas. It's just like, whoa, I cannot believe we're actually doing this. I can't believe we're still talking about this.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway.
Facts of what the British did around the world, you know, including in this country, to the people of this country. The crimes of the British and the crimes of that we committed and that were done in our names over 400 years of pillage and conquest is something that we don't like to think about, and yet it is everywhere in modern British history.
It's
When
uncomfortable,
people talk about
that's why.
It's stunning to me that if you ask British people who voted for Brexit what their major fear is, their fear is that people will come to our country and take our things. And
That's exactly.
like, you know, why?
Ironic.
I just can't. It doesn't compute. But we don't know this history. You know, I took history in British schools up to the age of 18, and I got a pretty good grade. And most
You never learned a line of colonial history, did you?
well, almost everything that you have just said, I learned from your book.
I'm going to throw quickly back to Shashi because you know, one of the great heroes of the Second World War, in fact of the 20th century, Winston Churchill, you've basically accused him in your book of complicity in a famine that killed 4 million Bengalis.
Yeah, it's
Rightly so.
4.3. I mean, Churchill personally took the decisions that actually not only plunged Bengal into starvation, but had the British actually purchase grain that the Bengalis could barely afford to buy in order to ship it to Europe, not to aid the war effort as his defenders claim, but to boost the buffer stocks in the event of a future possible invasion of Greece and Yugoslavia. People started dying, and Churchill said, well, it's all their fault anyway for breeding like rabbits. He said, I hate the Indians, they're a beastly people with a beastly religion. Australian ships were docking in Calcutta port and were ordered by Churchill and his odious paymaster, General Lord Chauvel, not to disembark their wheat, but to sail on to Europe, where their wheat might be used in some future reserve stock. On top of that, when conscience-stricken British officials...
Yes, I was going to say, did Churchill know people would die?
Yes, the conscience-stricken British officials are constantly sending memoranda to the Prime Minister personally, because it was his decision, saying that people were dying literally on the streets, and all Churchill could bring himself to do was write peevishly on the side of the file, why hasn't Gandhi died yet?
Wow.
And this is the man the British want us to hail as an apostle of freedom and democracy, when he has as much blood on his hands as some of the worst genocidal dictators of the 20th century.
That is so messed up.
Thank you. You underlined that.
I mean, the truth of the matter is, I mean, if you take any, I mean, it's not always true, but I think for a lot of people that are revered, even leaders, recent leaders, I'm not going to get into specifics. There are leaders who are highly revered, and it's like, but they have blood on their hands. You know? Everybody's got their dirt. Churchill has a lot of things that he is praised for, but it seems he's got an equal amount that he shouldn't be praised for, that he should have been condemned for. That's the scary thing. I don't know, man. This gets, it gets crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the most disturbing thing to me, and the thing that just like baffles my brain, is just how someone could be so far removed or just so detached from any sense of humanity to not see, even though, yeah, fine, you're British and here are Indians who are suffering, but they're people, and you're also responsible for taking care of them because, you know, you invaded their country.
I think it comes down to what we see what we want to see at the end of the day, whether it's within ourselves or within the person we have chosen to be our leader, right? And so let's just look at Trump as an example. If you're asking someone on the right, more than likely they're going to talk about the positive things he's done. If you ask someone on the left, they'll talk about the negative things he's done. I personally think Trump is single-handedly responsible for so many deaths in this country because of his negligence. That's my opinion. But if you ask someone, maybe even within my family, who's from the right, they'll feel the total opposite and say, no, he didn't have a fair shot. It wasn't his fault. It was these other reasons. And excuses will be made for why he's actually a good person. And I understand why they believe what they believe. But it comes down to that. Like, the Brits saw him a particular way,
Yeah.
and the people oppressed by him saw him a different way. Both people are probably right for the reasons that they're listing, although I completely disagree in the case of Trump. But I'm just saying, like, Winston Churchill, I have to believe that he's done some good things for England to hold him in such high regard.
Yeah,
right?
he was a great wartime leader.
Right.
But
I saw Gary Oldman's movie. But obviously, like, we can't ignore these things.
yeah,
So-
absolutely. You can't.
Thank you. You underlined that point so well, we can let others debate it. You're watching the Melbourne Writers' Festival Q&A. If you have a question for our political leaders, join Q&A in the House this week. Shashi, you're a politician. What do you think? I mean, obviously you've spent a lot of time looking at this and thinking about it.
Well, I think part of the problem really is that every movement creates or provokes a reaction, and there's going to be reactions, whether it's the right that's making advances or the left. There's no question that the world has moved on. I don't think this show, when it first began, would necessarily have had the first guest acknowledging the owners of the land and paying tribute to their elders. That's already a sign of respect for a sensitivity that was ignored in the past in Australia. I think you'll certainly find that the way in which the discourse has moved around the world on things like homosexual rights, on things like other privileges for same-sex couples, transgenders, all of this...
Not moving very fast in India, your own country, I should say.
Well, transgenders, curiously, is moving faster than same-sex relationships in terms of political acceptability, simply because culturally we've simply been used to them being around all this time.
Why did he do that? Why did he feel the need to do that, to say that? Why did he feel the need to point that out? As if that somehow is elevating his position or his country or something. Like, why did he feel the need to point that out?
I'm not sure.
That to me is a total fucking red herring. That's a red herring. So what? Now what? How does that move the conversation along? It always irritates me when people do stuff like that. And it's usually from, I'm sorry to say this, and I say this as someone half white. It's usually from someone white who does that. Usually. I've seen people of other ethnic descents do that as well. You know, it's a good tactic. It's called a scarecrow tactic.
Right.
It irritates me every time.
Political acceptability, simply because culturally we've simply been used to them being around all this time. Homosexuality, frankly, was completely acceptable in Indian culture for 2,000 years, till the Brits came along and outlawed it. Yeah. And then we have
we are going to come. We're going to come to your notions of the Brits.
I think, Laurie, there's actually two kinds of backlash going on in the world right now. There is a backlash against globalization, which has created winners and losers, and these people see themselves as losers. And they ask why they should vote for politicians or sending their jobs off to Shanghai. But there's also a cultural backlash going on. I think Michael talked about the globalized elites, right? Hillary and Goldman Sachs, all of this stuff. It was a revolt against Davos man on the economic front, but was also a revolt for greater cultural authenticity, religious identity, nationalism. All of these things, I think, lay behind Trump, lay behind Brexit, lie behind Geert Wilders in the Netherlands or Marine Le Pen in France. This is a phenomenon that's worldwide. I mean, the details, the manifestation may vary from place to place. But these two backlashes are taking place. Sometimes they're both together. Sometimes they're separate. For India, we have a cultural backlash with a party that's very much, for a religious identity, just like Turkey. But we don't have a backlash against globalization. They want to be Davos man. They don't want to reject Davos man.
Well, look, I'm going to say the question was really about whether the discussion will change outside of the Western countries, where it's become a kind of dominant symbolic argument.
Well, the Western countries have an influence to some degree. But for example, in India, I tried to introduce a law that will simply decriminalize consensual sexual relations between consenting adults. And I was shouted down by the ruling party to a point that 2 attempts to just introduce a bill were not permitted. In other words, a bill never even got introduced, let alone discussed.
Wow.
That's the kind of resistance we're facing in India. Now, fortunately, the Supreme Court has just given a ruling on the right to privacy that suggests we could very easily apply that in a court action to these issues, and that could in turn widen the scope. Initially, once you make, people's right to love each other legal, only then can you start thinking about things like marriage. We haven't got there yet. We have to take the first step first.
Do you equate your government, incidentally, the Modi government, with...
And the opposition, not my government.
No.
It is my government.
Yes,
my
the government of India,
yes.
The Modi government. Do you sort of equate that with the religious right in other countries?
In many ways, yes. I think Mr. Modi, to his credit, hasn't himself, since becoming Prime Minister, said anything particularly directly bigoted, as he used to in his previous incarnation and during his campaigns, but he's unleashed forces that are really no different in many ways from the kind of right-wing religious talk we've seen in other countries from other religions. So it really is worrying that we're seeing a kind of naked chauvinism that wasn't polite to even express in the old days in India.
Shashi, former diplomat, what do you think?
Wow.
Well, I think we've got to think for a minute that maybe the actors in this are not as irrational as they seem to all of us. And Kim Jong-un probably is looking, for example, at Saddam Hussein's experience, is saying this guy boasted about weapons of mass destruction and he got overthrown by the Americans for his pains. Let me show them I have weapons of mass destruction and they won't dare to overthrow me. So it's a way of buying himself, in a sense, perpetuity, regime insurance, if you like, or insurance against regime change. Mm-hmm. In some ways, therefore, what he's doing with all of this is saying, don't try and overthrow me because the price you'll have to pay is far too high to pay. He's saying, Seoul is easy for me to take out. Guam is easy for me to nuke.
Wow.
Japan is within the range of my missiles. That's why he just fired one above it. San Francisco isn't too far away either, folks. So do you want to play that kind of hardball with me, or will you leave me alone to be myself?
Is that the sort of hardball that India plays with Pakistan?
Oh, I wish. No.
Because, both North Korea, India and Pakistan, well, the three of them have all broken international laws in order to build a nuclear arsenal.
No, it's a little more complicated than that. India has...
Not that much more complicated.
Well, it is. India rightly, I think, considered the non-proliferation treaty to be an abomination. It's the last existence of apartheid in international law, where a bunch of countries says that we are entitled to have something that the rest of you are not. I mean, that's racism plain and simple, and it will not be acceptable.
That's the argument of North Korea.
Exactly. So what I'm trying to say is maybe we'll have to live with a nuclear North Korea. As Tom Lehrer said in the famous lyric, the Lord's our shepherd, says the psalm, but just in case, we better have a bomb. That's exactly what Kim Jong-un is thinking.
Yeah, this is such a complicated conversation because it also deals with like industry, pollution and whatnot. You know, America had its industrial revolution and whatnot, and we went through all that. And so we have polluted the world. America's polluted the world. We have a huge carbon footprint. And with that, we've been able to advance quite a bit. And so India is going through its, evolution as well. And it's creating pollution and whatnot. And so here we are, Western countries, trying to tell them, kind of take it down a notch. It's like, you guys got to do that though.
Yeah, we're just trying to catch up now.
We're just trying to catch up. And you're trying to tell us to slow down. You're not going to help us out with technology. You're not going to help us out with anything. You're just telling us to quit it. And so likewise with this, I guess it's a frightening thought. I never put it in that perspective with the whole nuclear bomb thing.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, but it is true. I mean, America's got several thousand nukes. I think something like 21,000 nukes.
Wow.
It's something absurd, right?
Like, why do you even need that many?
If you had 5, I think you'd be good.
Yeah.
But 21,000 nukes, right? As a nuclear empowered nation, we're trying to tell another nation not to have nukes.
Yeah.
And it's,
especially, I mean, actually maybe I shouldn't say, but like I don't remember all of the details, but isn't it a situation where it's like, okay, hold up, like maybe Pakistan has some nukes and they'll definitely point them at us, so this is just insurance.
Oh, for India, you mean?
Yeah, to just be safe. I don't remember.
I don't know. I just remember watching the movie with John Abraham of India trying to develop its first nuke and saying like, we're nuclear powered as well. Nuclear armed, I should say, because they had to dodge the American satellites.
Right,
for the thing that they're talking about. And the thing about it is, at the end of the day, it's only fair. I mean, they're trying to protect 1 billion people. It's fair that they are, if America gets to have nukes, because we're saying that we're, dismantling our nukes and whatnot, which is like, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
Have you seen the facilities, like the nuclear waste that happens when you're dismantling nukes? Like you can't actually, it's kind of impossible to get rid of this stuff.
Yeah.
I learned everything I learned from a video game, just so you know. It's called Metal Gear Solid. So but the facilities these things are kept in, there's no way to truly get rid of this stuff.
I don't admire the man. He's everything that Michael says he is. He's a nasty character. He's a Stalinist dictator. He's putting his people in great misery and poverty. But at the same time, if you think of him as a rational actor, what he's doing is a fairly rational calculation. And I think it should give pause to anybody who might be contemplating any military adventure against North Korea. The price would be far too high to pay.
Yeah.
I agree with that train of thought.
Yeah.
Just for full disclosure to the audience, we didn't watch the entire video because, well, we did. I should say. But like we realized there was like some weird, it took a weird direction and then it like repeated itself. So I don't know why it was edited that way. And so the video was cut shorter, not because it wasn't interesting. It just like, it was just edited strange.
It's weird, yeah.
Anyway, here we are about 45 minutes later. So all I can really say, I guess, is that what SHASHI THAROOR said here, SHASHI THAROOR, I'm still saying his name wrong, I know. What he said here was quite interesting. I didn't know that he had any more that could like make me go, whoa. I thought he got it all out at Oxford, right?
Yeah.
Seeing him in this debate arena, I suppose you could say, dealing with other people who, I mean, mainly the host, who's sort of combating him a little bit, and getting to ask these questions, it's interesting because with the Oxford situation, it was more him just sort of
having a speech.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting about him is like he is actually a very good speaker.
Orator, yeah.
Yeah, like he's so composed. He's so eloquent.
Yeah.
And even when the moderator of the panel throws some sort of like jab at him, he can just kind of laugh it off. And
he does a rope-a-dope.
Yeah, he just continues talking about what he's talking about and making some really good points.
I'm willing to bet he studied debate quite a bit. I mean,
100%.
He was able to do a verbal rope-a-dope very slick.
Yeah, super smooth. Yeah.
I thought that was well handled.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he's very clear about his country. That's the thing. It's like the host tried to kind of call him out, going, "Oh, look what India's doing." He's like, "No, I know." And so,
that's like, what can you say when someone tries to like catch you out and you're like, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah.
And also this.
Well, that's actually one of the trade skills of Donald Trump. You gotta hand it to him, unfortunately, is that he knows to just go, I know. Like, he was called out on, because he's like, China. And then I forgot which night show host called him out. He's like, your suits are made in China. He goes, yeah, they are. And somehow he just moved on and no one cared. It was the weirdest thing. And so, yeah, what SHASHI THAROOR did there was he acknowledged it and he's like, well, here's what's going on. And here's how actually Britain contributed to it, by the way. No big deal. It's fascinating stuff, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I don't know. The fascinating is usually assigned to positive things. I guess it's positive to know. You know, it's good to know.
Knowledge is power. And I think what the lady Laurie was saying, as Brits, we're not taught about the history of our colonialism in history classes.
Yeah, we're not even taught everything about America in America.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I mean, like, you look at America and it greatly saddens me when I think about the Native Americans and the atrocities that were done to them. And being here in this country, they are all but invisible to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I very rarely run across anyone who is Native American. I've maybe met like not even a handful of people since I've been here in the States, that are Native American descent. And it's like, well, this was their land. There's so much trauma. There's so many crimes and atrocities that colonials have done to the peoples and the countries that they colonized.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think some sort of acknowledgement or understanding, learning has to happen.
What I really like about SHASHI THAROOR is that he's not against pointing out the flaws of his own country and trying to deal with that as well. He mentioned trying to get this bill on the floor for just equal love, basically. Mm-hmm. I've seen him on Twitter as well. Like, the guy is very outspoken, you know? It's not just, oh, the Brits screwed us over. It's like, no, well, here's what's going on in the country right now that we need to do something about. I think the guy's brave.
Yeah.
He's extremely outspoken.
And one thing that I did appreciate when he was kind of telling all the stuff that British people had done and the thing about Winston Churchill and the Bengali famine, right?
Yeah.
He also brought up the fact that there were many Brits who wrote to the Prime Minister and were like, hey, these people are starving. They're like literally dying in the streets. Like, I appreciated that because it's so easy to just kind of paint with broad strokes and say like all the Brits were bad or like they were all awful, terrible people. But like, yeah, I appreciated that he brought up the fact that there were some people who were also like trying to
make a difference,
do something. Like they were seeing that something was wrong and they were trying to make it right. But ultimately, what are you gonna do? Your prime minister is being a douche nozzle. So.
Yeah, I don't imagine that either of us are educated enough to really add any more to this conversation. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I think the most important part is that we just hear what is being said here.
Yeah.
But I also asked the question of what can you do now? What can one do now? It's like, okay, so you're armed with this knowledge, now what? Like, that's the only thing I guess I'm wondering about now from Shashi Tharoor is like, okay, so now what though? Like, because he's speaking to a lot of people, right? But I don't expect Britain to do anything different. Like, I don't expect them to make to pay what's it called? Reparations.
Return.
Yeah, I don't
precious
expect
artifacts, gems. Yeah.
The amount that would be due with interest, it would completely bankrupt Britain, right? So they're not going to do that. They're not going to give back the jewels.
Yeah.
So what does everybody else do who hears him? Like, now what? That's all I want to know from him, in his opinion. But like,
yeah, I don't know.
The most powerful part of everything he said, though, in terms of a sort of truncated form of his feelings, I think was captured in the first 3 minutes. Everything he said in response to that dude was just like,
yeah,
that was such a mic drop moment.
Mic drop.
And just you almost saw the color drain from the dude's face in the audience.
It's like, oh no,
Yeah,
everything
like-
that I believed.
Yeah, it was.
He can debate it.
Quite amazing. But
Yeah.
then I think he said he has Shashi Tharoor's book.
Clearly had not read it yet.
No, I think he had read it. Maybe. Sometimes when you're given information, I think that you've got this like lens
Filter
that you see it through, and it doesn't allow you to really absorb all the data and information that's being spoken to you because you're still like holding tightly to this.
To your prejudices and your paradigms.
Sure. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Just a little patience, a little skepticism.
Goes a long way.
Yeah. And reach out and express love. You guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Love y'all. I'm Jaby KOAY. This is
ACHARA KIRK.
Peace out.